we like to bring in a couple Hall of Famers every year and call it Meet the Hall of Famers, and we definitely have that this year. One of our inductees back in 2001, Jack's in demand. Back in 2001, we have Brad Doty with us, and 2009 inductee, Jac Haudenschild, with us today. Really happy today to have these two guys together and want to talk a little bit about their childhood and those days, maybe more than these days, but just want to talk about that a little bit and the history, because sometimes we assume that everybody knows everything about you guys, and we want to talk about that a little bit. So start with Brad over there, and Brad, talk about where you grew up. You grew up on a farm, didn't you? Or
gosh, that was so long ago I forgot. But, being a kid.
You forgot that car we were looking at earlier.
Yeah.
Too.
Actually, born in Millersburg, Ohio, and lived in Millersburg till between 3rd and 4th grade, and was just, about a half mile from Jack's house. So that's how we started out day one, we've known each other. Of course, his dad raced locally and was a local hero and worked on semi-trucks, and both our dads drove semi-truck, so that's how we all got to know each other. And then I moved to a farm in Apple Creek between 3rd and 4th grade, and didn't actually see these guys for a couple years. And then, I don't know, 14, somewhere in there, we kind of got reconnected and started having some fun.
Gotcha. Now, did your dad farm, or was he always just a trucker?
Yeah, we had just a small farm, 87 acres, and so he still drove truck, but he was going, just like John, they'd usually leave on a Sunday night and be back Wednesday or Thursday. No long hauls or cross country. Usually it was like from Ohio to Chicago and back, that kind of thing. And so, we still did some farming, and I had to do a lot of the feeding. We had beef cattle, no dairy cattle, and hated every minute of it.
You knew you wanted to do something else.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Were your folks, were they race fans, or were they?
Well, no, just because of John. My dad, being friends with John, would go to the races, and my dad, I think, ran one time an old stock car, and a wheel came off and got him in the door or something, and he parked it and said, enough of that. He just wanted to watch. So, we would, as kids, I remember at Hilltop playing in the dirt with our little race cars while John was out racing, and my dad was in the pits and that kind of thing. And like I said, those were, before 3rd grade. So it was still Millersburg, and that's where Hilltop Speedway's at.
Yeah. And how about you, Jack? Obviously, you didn't have a choice to get into racing, right? With your dad running, John, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, we grew up, like Brad said, we grew up at the racetrack, and every single weekend, and we had a lot of fun. Dad just raced every weekend, and usually rode in the car with him. He usually pulled it with a car or something, however he could get it there. And he'd stop at the bar after races. We'd wait on him to have a couple beers and track and ride home with him. And we had fun going to races all the time.
Yeah. Were you just hell on wheels? I mean, you had to be when you were a kid, weren't you?
Well, yeah, a little bit. My dad was definitely a daredevil. He grew up flying airplanes, and we were 7, 8 years old. We'd fly in the airplane with him, and he'd fly upside down, and he did some crazy stuff in a small little airplane. But so we grew up, and
he had no training or never had a license or anything, did he?
He had no training. He never had a license or nothing. But he flew everywhere. I think he lost his driver's license and got an airplane, actually.
That have anything to do with the bar stops at all? Or
it might have. So, we just grew up, and like I said, he went trucking all the time, and and then my brother started 2 years before I did racing, so we always looked up to him because he always knew what to do with the car and stuff, and helped me and Brad out, and and then we ran into Kenny Jacobs a few years later and seen him racing, and then we all four got together and we did a lot of crazy stuff.
That's why we're here.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
gonna talk.
Some of it we're not going to talk about, Jack.
No. We're off to a good start, though. Now, Brad, that's really how you got in the racing thing. Then is with their family.
Yeah, and Jack's got the nickname the Wild Child. He was the Wild Child long before he ever sat in a race car. So we from the mini bike days, we as kids running mini bikes and I don't know if you remember tearing up our yard up at the farmhouse. We made a track. It had rained and we were always on these little Indian no suspension. I mean, breaking the frames and all kinds of stuff, doing jumping and all that stuff. But I got in a little trouble for that because we tore the heck out of the backyard after it rained. It was a mud hole and we were done. But we had some fun.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And did you start? I know you started in a modified. What did you start in, Jack, when you started racing?
I had an old, my dad got me, it was actually a sprint car. It was just an old cut down dirt champ car into a sprint car. It looked good. It had a nice body on it and stuff, but it wasn't much of a car. And
Hell, a lot better than what I had.
And yeah, Kenny and Brad, they started in, my brother, they started in an old modified. And Kenny started in an old Sidewinder car. It was an unbelievable car. I mean, and he just drove the crap out of it. But yeah, we all seemed to have our years at Lakeville when we started at Lakeville Speedway. And Brad had a couple good years, and Ed did have a couple good years, and we all had our good years over there. And then I think Brad was the first one to get a big time ride and started running Lernerville and running around a little bit. And then I'd get an Outlaw ride every once in a while and run for a guy, and then we just started traveling more and more. And when we started racing, we were doing it for the fun of it. Really didn't know where it was heading, and we definitely didn't think we'd be doing it for a living or anything like that. But like the kids today are trained from day one, know right where they're going, and I don't think we run 15 races a year really. For 2 or 3 years, we didn't race any. We'd get rained out half them times, so we didn't get no racing in for 3 or 4 years, really.
Yeah, that's we started fairly young. At that time, the average age was probably 30 some years old for the drivers. And here, Ed started at 16. Like Jack said, he was the first one of us to kind of get things started for us younger guys. But it was pretty unusual for young guys to start racing, at that age. But like Jack said, we'd run Lakeville one night a week, and it was, I think, 15 or 20 lap A main even, and so we didn't have a lot, and the season was short, didn't have a lot of laps those first few years, where some of these kids today that, start out 5, 6 years old, by the time they're 15 or 16 years old, they've got thousands of laps, so we were very fortunate for the four of us to start it at what I'll call affectionately a little podunk racetrack in Ohio, to move on to the national level and stuff. A lot of things happened our way, and we were fortunate in a lot of ways.
I was going to ask you talk about Lakeville a little bit. What was the size of that and things of that nature?
I think probably a quarter mile is what they probably listed at.
Yeah, I think it was a quarter. Yeah, but it's a nice little track.
Yeah, it was.
Nice track. Good racing.
I look at pictures now, and I mean the grandstands, it probably maybe seated 1,000 people, maybe,
right.
at the most. But they did put on good races.
Yeah, they had a lot of older drivers there that were definitely good drivers. We looked up to, and I mean a lot of good guys. 4, 5, 6 guys went a year over there, so they had a lot of good guys.
Doesn't sound like you guys were intimidated, though. You said the average age was in the 30s, but doesn't sound like you're intimidated to get out there and run. Were they helpful to you and that sort of thing, or
there were a couple. Roger.
Or were they just like punk kids? Get out,
Yeah, there were a couple that were just thought we were punk kids and didn't want us around, and definitely didn't give us any room or anything. But Roger Wiles was probably the nicest. He was the king for a while at Lakeville, and he was one of them that really kind of opened himself up to us and gave us help. We got to know him and hung out with him, went to his shop at times. As a matter of fact, I drove a sprint car once at Mansfield, drove for Ken Bodkins out of, he was from the Galleon area, and then got into Pope's, the car from Creston. There's Creston's about, what, 500 or 600 people.
Yeah, yeah.
And at one time, there were 3 sprint car teams in that town, you know, and John Harmon, Jack drove for him in the 34 car, and the 6X that Kenny Jacobs started in that I ended up getting in, and, you know, was my first real good sprint car ride.
This new T-shirt you have, it has like 800 cars on it. And I figure they're missing probably 700 more. You know,
there's a few missing. Every once in a while, I got an owner that says, "Hey, my car ain't on there." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that one."
Now you won your first race at Lernerville, right? And
no, I won my first
where was
one
your first
at
Lakeville. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
you were about
Lakeville.
16 or so. Or?
Yeah, 16. And
Yeah.
I don't know where Brett. Where
My first one was at Lakeville.
I think we all won
Yeah.
our first. I think my brother might have won Wayne County, so
Yeah.
Wayne County. But
Your first real good car with the Nichols brothers, would you say?
I
or-
was 18 when I drove for the Nickel brothers from Lyman. They'd take me. I was 18. They'd take me to Florida back when the Nationals were 80 cars down there, and that was a big deal. They took me. They'd take me down there every year, and you know, take me to the Eldora Nationals, and so they were.
How'd
good
they
guys.
find out about you? Were they friends or were they?
I just I went up and asked them for a ride, and first time I asked them for a ride, Don looked at me and said, "You ain't old enough to be in the pits, so you can't drive my car." So I kept hounding at them and got the ride.
So just kept pestering them, and
Yeah.
finally they
They gave in.
yeah. Would you say your first one was with the Bodkins, or
Yeah.
one where you knew that you had some equipment? And
Yeah,
you
that
know-
was like Jackson, the modified. The one that I started in was the one Ed started in, and it was 20-some years old when Ed got it. And we say, you know, more, it was like a super modified. You know, it wasn't like an Oswego modified or a dirt car modified, or even an IMCA modified. It just was a really crudely built open wheel sprint car.
Yeah.
And you know, that's kind of, you know, what I started in, ran that for a couple of years, but the first real sprint car was with Ken Bodkins, and I won a race at Lakeville, but he also fired me on my birthday that year, so. So I knew right then that sprint car racing, there were a lot of ups and downs.
I know Shirley Keir helped you out too, didn't she? She's another Hall of Famer.
Yeah, Shirley Keir's. My big break came, I was running the 6X that Kenny Jacobs got out of, and it was a 4-bar Nance car, and boy, you know, and it was 4 or 5 years old when I got it after Kenny, but to run a 4-bar car, Ed moved from the modified to a CAE spring front. Boy, and that was pretty big time for Lakeville.
Yeah.
There were a few 4-bar cars there, but this Nance car was state of the art for the time when Kenny got it, and then he ran it, like I said, for several years, and he moved up to I think got in Flake's car, Chad Kemenol's dad's car,
Yeah.
and so I got in the 6X, eventually became the 28D, and on a fluke deal, Lakeville, like Jackson, we said earlier, it was such a short season that when Lakeville ended, we decided to go to Tri-City in Western
Franklin, Pennsylvania.
Yep, Western Pennsylvania one year. And I don't know if I'd ever run, I guess I ran a couple shows without a wing. No, I don't think I did till we went over there. And boy, I was running terrible, you know, and they had a restart with, I don't know, seemed like 8 or 10 laps to go, and I was going nowhere. And they dropped a green single file, and I went down the back straightaway way over my head, and I thought I was going through the wall and slid up and found the cushion. Well, Lakeville, that never had a cushion, so I didn't know what this berm or curb was. And I ended up running 4th, and thought, man, this is pretty cool. So the next week, we go back, and the top 4 from the previous week are in the dash. So I'm in the dash, this young kid out of nowhere, and I'm running pretty good till I hit the wall and turned it over. So I found out real quick what that cushion can bite. But we decided that this opened the season the following year, and they went to 16 square foot wings then in Western Pennsylvania, and we opened the season over there, and we're just going to run a few races. And next thing you know, we're leading the points at Lernerville and Tri-City, leading the Western Pennsylvania State Championship. So we decided to stay and run, and about halfway through the year, I mean, the car literally had to pay for itself. I mean, whatever money we made had to go back into the car. And so I turned it over mid-season, and basically our season was done. 2 championships looked like they were going to be done. And when you mentioned Shirley Keir, that's where this story is going, is because there was a guy named Sam Bowers who sponsored a late model, and he was sitting in the grandstands when I turned over. And when word got out that I was done for the season, people got a hold of him, wanted to know if he'd sponsor the car. So he calls me up. It's like a Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, and told me to go to Keir's Speed Shop and get whatever parts we needed to fix the car. I was like, is this guy for real? So I called another friend of mine who owned a mechanic shop that worked on trucks. So he worked on all of Sam Bowers' coal trucks. And he said, yep, the guy's legitimate. Get what you need. I guarantee you, he'll come through. So I go to Shirley Keir's and buy about $2,000 worth of parts. And on a promise, I told her, I said, there's a guy that's going to pay for all this.
Which would be $20,000 now, probably.
Yeah. And I mean, I had never met the guy. We just talked on the phone, and Shirley, bless her heart, she gave me all the parts basically on credit. And I remember going out the door. She said, well, if the guy doesn't come through, you have to pay me back winning races, I guess. And so she had faith in me and Sam Bowers to let me walk out the door with all these parts. We put the car back together, went back to Lernerville, and won the feature the very next week. So he was pretty impressed that you could tear up a car like that, come back and win. So he kept us going through the rest of the year, and then at the end of that year, he bought everything from the Creston group of guys that owned it. And I moved to Western Pennsylvania, and he flew me to Wichita, Kansas. I'd never been on an airplane before, and flew me out there to buy another new Nance car, and my world exploded from there.
Yeah. Now, Jack, Brad mentioned Run Without the Wing. You were no stranger to that. Yeah, I mean, you're traveling around. You meet up with Bob Hampshire too, right? During that time,
yeah,
and
there was
the Nichols and
Bob. Nickel brothers. I think they were the first one to take me non-wing racing, and I'd race Lyman Land every Friday or Saturday night with them guys, and so we pretty much mixed it up when I started racing. I'd race 2 nights with the wing and 1 night without the wing, so I ended up racing a lot of non-wing stuff when I first got started.
Did you prefer one or the other, or it didn't matter?
Nah, it never really mattered to me. I felt comfortable either way, so.
Didn't know any better, huh?
Didn't know no better. You're right.
Where did he find his first cushion? I wonder.
Oh, man, I can't even remember. Like Brad said, Lakeville really didn't have a cushion, and I think Lyman Land was really high bank back then. And
we all think of you on the cushion.
Is that where the Hod line started?
Yeah, it might have. But, yeah, Lyman Land used to really be high bank. So, and talking about Shirley Keir, we just, if we went to Keir's Speed Shop, that was a big deal because we never went and got parts hardly ever. And if we got to go up there and get something, we was hoping we'd see Ferkel up there if we went up. And it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And Shirley, she helped everybody back get started back in.
When did you hook up with Jack Hewitt, that guy?
I started racing with Jack. He was like 5 or 6 years older than me, and he
still is probably.
Yeah, and he kind of took me under his wing and helped me get rides out in California, and so Jack helped me out a lot back getting started. He would get me rides, and like I said, I rode to California with him a couple times, and.
That'd be a book of its own, wouldn't it?
He took you to Australia too, right?
Yeah, I went to Australia with him, and so
you were only what, 18 when you did? Because
I
was so
18
envious.
18 or 19, yeah.
Would you like to be a fly on the wall on that trip to California?
Yeah.
Or the trip to Australia in the plane? Or
Any trip with those two.
Yeah, he was fun to hang around.
You have any stories from Jack that are from the road or anywhere?
Oh, I think one time we ran out of gas. We were in his van. There's, I think, 4 of us, and I think Brian Kemenall was with us, and he was really young, and I think he rode out there with us, and I think we ran out of gas, and it was the middle of the night, and he wanted me to take off walking, and I said, I ain't walking nowhere. Not in the middle of the night. You can go. He took off walking and finding gas.
Wow. Wow.
But it was a good time.
Was that like your first trip, like out to Ascot? You both had success at Ascot. Was that like your first trip out there? And what were your
Yeah.
impressions of, you got strange cars, good-looking cars, and
Oh,
you're in
yeah.
L.A. and
Yeah, it was definitely different there at Ascot. I think I used to go out and run turkey night every year in the midget out there. I did that for quite a few years. I'd fly out every year, and that's where I met my wife through a race with Mike Sweeney, and
that's her brother.
Yep. And I went to Australia with him, and that's how I got hooked up with my wife. From her, she came from a racing family too.
How about the track? Big half mile with.
Oh yeah, the
short
track was
corners?
ask Brad. The track's probably one of the most unique tracks there is. Big long straightaways, paperclip track, and them non-wing guys there. They were all really good to the local guys, and they'd back them cars in, and it was definitely hard to beat them guys there on the home turf.
What were some of the cars you were running out there when you did Turkey Night with the midgets? Who'd you race for out there?
Howard, Larry Howard. He had the top of the line midgets back in, and I raced for him. And I think there was a couple other owners. They had Shevchuk, and it was definitely fun going out there and running midgets.
Yeah. How about the sprint cars? Any of the sprint car owners out there hire you during those times, or did you haul all the way out there with?
Yeah, usually I went out there and had a ride before I went out there, so I didn't really get a ride when I got there, so I always had something set up.
Yep. How about you, Brad? Talk about Ascot a little bit.
It just was, so unique. Had palm trees in the infield, and you could see the Hollywood sign up on the hill. It was almost downtown Los Angeles, and it'd been a lot of TV and shows and movies, and you just didn't know. Sometimes actors and celebrities would show up, and it was just unbelievable. I mean, the Agajanians and how they promoted the racetrack, and just the Ascot sign up on the fence. It was iconic. That just really something special. And for me, it was really special because I won the biggest race of my career, the Pacific Coast Nationals in '86, which was the final race for the World of Outlaws in 1986. And so we won that, and it paid $10,000 to win. That was new Rodeck aluminum block, and Craco stereos sponsored it, and we got all kinds of stereos. I mean, it took a truck to haul everything out of there. And so that was my big, and Bobby Davis, and it's on video, it's on YouTube, somebody posted it. We passed each other 4 times in one lap, and I won it. I think he ended up second. Woofy and Steve and Sammy were all behind me, so it was a big win. Well, then J.W. Hunt, and old timers remember J.W. Hunt.
Another Hall of Famer, yeah.
Yep, strawberry farmer from Florida that had a lot of money and would show up at a racetrack and just hand it out to somebody that crashed, or go over and pay a tire bill or fuel bill. So he was out there, and he put up a $3,000 bonus for the highest average finish from the Pacific Coast Nationals, and then the next day was a CRA non-wing race. And like I said, I'd run some non-wing races, but not nearly enough to be running Ascot, really, to be comfortable. And so anyway, we took the wing off, and I ended up getting 5th, I believe, and getting a $3,000 bonus. But the real story to this guy right here was running in front of me. And like I said, we were 4th or 5th, and it was 2 laps to go, maybe, something like that. He's running in front of me, and he wins the race. And I still to this day don't know how he did it. I ended up 5th, got the overall bonus, but he won the race.
You remember that one?
Yeah. I remember that. That was a good race.
So tell us how you did it.
Tell us how you did it the last few laps.
It was actually the 3 CRA champions were running with 2 laps to go. They were running 1, 2, 3. And we got an off-singer coming out of 4 for the checkered. And, it was definitely good because it was good passing the 3 champions at the end of the race. So
and those guys
one I don't forget.
Yeah.
One I won't forget.
Those California cars I talk about it in my book too. I mean, they were chromed up and custom paint jobs and just absolutely beautiful sprint cars.
Yeah, if you guys go down to the museum, there's the 1973 CRA championship cars down there in our Ascot area, and it's beautiful. And those cars from California always had a different look to them, with the gold leaf and those types of things. Knopfsinger's never told me that story. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
I guarantee he's not going to tell you. The thing always struck me about Ascot, the chaparral trailers in those days, if you had a chaparral trailer, I mean, they were top of the line, high end, high dollar. And a lot of these teams had dually pickups lowered. I mean, California lowered, dropped on the ground, custom paint jobs. And I have to laugh because they'd put the tailgate down and roll this beautiful sprint car out, and maybe 2 or 3 sets of tires in a small toolbox. And some of them lived 4 or 5 blocks from the speedway, but they had this beautiful rig to get it there, and that's just part of California.
It is. Yeah.
That still goes on today.
Yeah.
You know, some of the biggest rigs go a couple miles, and
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
to the track. Let's get back to Brad. And then with Bowers, you went on the All-Stars, right? And you were the Rookie of the Year with them.
Yeah.
And it didn't take you long to then progress to the Outlaws, right?
Yeah, I was All-Stars Rookie of the Year in '81, and I didn't realize till we just voiced the MAV TV. The All-Stars are doing some 7 shows for MAV TV. They'll be airing this fall, and
September 2nd is the first one, I think. If you
Is it
want,
really?
If you want to be a real
I have no idea. But Dave Reef and I are doing those together.
cool.
And
Dave's from here, so that's
Yeah,
good. Originally.
yeah. And actually, he got his racing start because my daughter got sick at Eldora, and I was supposed to do Eldora, and I couldn't be there. And long story short, Dave got called in, and that was kind of his.
He was our announcer here, and
Yeah.
got called over there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I forgot.
Well, anyway, you were talking about the broadcast and how something came up.
Yeah. So the All Stars, this MAV TV things came up, and what were we talking about? so many.
Some kind of statistic or something. You said we were your Rookie of the Year. And,
Rookie of the Year. So during the MAV TV broadcast, Blake Anderson reminded me that I won the first All-Star race ever at Eldora, which was in '81.
That's cool.
And I didn't know that was the first one. So got Rookie of the Year with the All-Stars, and then my mind was moving too fast. I was thinking ahead, but then I got on the World of Outlaws tour in '82 with Sam Bowers and was Rookie of the Year. Led 4 or 5 races that I should have won, and either I screwed up or had a flat or something crazy happened, and won my first one in 1983.
Now, your first Outlaw season wasn't until mid-'80s or somewhere in there?
yeah,
Because you just race anywhere,
Yeah,
anything.
I can't even remember my first full season, and I think it might have been Kenny Rogers' 18 car. I don't know if that was my first full season or
Could have
not.
been.
But I'm not very good at dates or anything like that.
Did you hang around with Kenny a lot, or was it? Did you hang around with Kenny at all?
Kenny, I rode in a rig with him, and
that's cool.
we'd ride from here to California, and he wouldn't say 2 words. But, yeah.
Because he was singing the whole time, or no?
He wasn't saying nothing. But we always got along good. Everybody, said, I don't know if you get along with Kenny, but we always got along real good, and he was fun. I drove the whole World of Outlaw season with him with the Kenny Rogers car, and then again with the Casey Luna car.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time with Kenny Woodruff, and
You won that Kings Royal. Was it in that
I won
car?
that with Gary Stanton.
In '86, was
87, I think.
it? '87.
But he like I said, he didn't say much, but it was fun. It was fun going with him.
Yeah. And you both drove for Gary Stanton. You were good
Yeah.
friends with him, weren't you, Brad?
Yeah, I was actually in Stanton's car when I got hurt. The year
Yeah.
it was in '88 in Gary's car. I drove for him at the first in '74. 74, and that was the Corky's Trick Paint '75 car. It was
Yeah.
kind of a West Coast car. It was beautiful, but Gary was on his honeymoon driving a motorhome, so I was towing the race car by myself all over the country.
He was doing everything.
Yeah, I'd go to the
He was
car
doing it all.
wash, and I was able to
By yourself, really? Just,
by myself.
yeah.
I was able to put one foot in on the brake pedal and take my left foot and push the car out of the trailer and roll it down the ramp and wash it, and pray like heck that somebody showed up to wash their street car to help me roll it back in. And Gary would always meet me at the racetrack, but in between it was pretty much me. And speaking of Kenny Woodruff, I think that's I ended up driving for him the Gambler House car too. That's how it evolved into the Coors Light Marks and Kepler car. But Kenny Woodruff, I mean, if he was sitting right here, he's a pretty gruff, he's hard on drivers. I mean, he expects 110% every night, and if you don't give it, you're going to hear about it. And
Yet he's a teddy bear inside.
Yeah, he is. He is.
Yeah,
He's
he
a big
is.
softy, a
Yeah.
really nice guy once you get to know him. But boy, that exterior and that, but we were in New York and it was hot, and I was working on the Stanton car by myself out in the parking lot, just sweat just rolling off of me. And Gary and his new wife were out antique shopping, and I was, I think I was changing an engine actually, and doing it by myself. And Woodruff was done for the day, and he goes walking by, and I'm in the trailer, and he sticks his head in the door, and Ken, he said, "Bud," he always said that, "Bud. All I can tell you is you must want to race pretty bad, I said, "Well, I do," and I think that helped me get in his car, because I think it showed him that, I was committed to it and would work for it, and I think he admired that, because he and I got along really well. We went to Florida, first all-star race, had a steel block. We had one engine, and burned a piston coming out of 4 for the checkered flag. We won, had to turn around and come home. And then he was trying to do it on his own. Yeah. And then mid-seasons when Les Kepler and Marks, took it over. But Kenny Woodruff told me a story, whether Jack remembered it, whether it's true or not, I don't know. But it's a Woodruff. Jack said he was riding with him, and Kenny said, "Jack, it's your turn to drive." And in the middle of the night, and said Jack kept balking, no. I said, I'm too tired. I said, it's your turn to drive. I got to sleep. So he said, Jack gets behind the wheel, and Kenny says pretty soon he kind of wakes up and he realizes they're not moving, and he looks over and they're pulled over and Jack's sound asleep. And he looked at the speedometer, and he said he drove about 50 miles, and Jack pulled over and fell asleep with everybody else. So I don't know if it's true or not, but I could see Jack doing that.
Yeah.
Better than the alternative.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I told him I get tired, I stop.
Yeah. All those. You've had so many big wins. We talked about the Kings Royal, but you've had so many big wins at Eldora, the first historical big one, right? And the one that I remember best, the Mopar Million, that was awesome. That Earl put all that money up and put it through the field, not just, well, you would have wished it was just on top, but because you won the thing, but $200,000 is what it paid, and $1 million purse through the field, and non-wing. So I remember everybody was talking about J.J. Ailey. He's winning the Triple Crown and stuff.
Yeah.
USAC, and I think the wing guys swept the podium maybe.
Stevie Smith ran second. And
he had never ran
without a wing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, if you're going to win one, that was the one to win for the year, because I don't think I was running very good that year, so that was good.
Yep, absolutely. And who were you driving for there? That was
I was driving for
Larry Woodward, was it?
Larry Woodward,
yeah,
from California. Yeah, so I ran for him that whole year, and then it just he ended up hiring Joey, I think, after that, and we split up, and I really don't know where we went after that, but
have to look at the shirt. Have to look at your shirt.
Yeah.
Probably your longest stints with Jack Eldon, and then with Dennis Roth. You had a couple stints with him too, right? Eldon, you had a lot of success. So talk about Jack
Jack, he was a great guy. He came to me, and I think it was Texas, and asked me if I was interested in driving for him, and it ended up being like a 9-year. Well, I think I raced for him for 9 years. So we made a good choice there, and then Pennzoil came along with that.
That was big.
So Jack was happy about that, because they ended up being a really good sponsor, and we ran the Outlaws the whole time, and he pretty much kept with me. We hired, we had quite a few different mechanics on that deal, year after year, but he always stuck with me, and just kind of let me run the show pretty much.
Yeah, it's hard to have consistency with those mechanics running in and out too.
It
you can
really
get hooked
is.
up with somebody for a long time. That's the
right.
best.
It is. I mean, it's hard to keep the same team together. You try to, but a lot of times it's just hard to keep the same 2 guys together.
Yep, absolutely. For you, Brad, after Bowers, you kind of went through a series of owners there for a while.
Yeah, I did.
Was your worst firing on your birthday, or was there a worse one that came in?
That was probably the worst one. But that's part of the business, changing rides. And
Sometimes it's your decision too, you know.
Yeah.
Or you know something's not working with the team.
Yeah. If it's not working and you know it's not, everybody's miserable. It's better for everybody to move on. And you've seen guys, you know, that a mechanic and a driver struggle, and they split up, and both of them have instant success with somebody else. It seems like so. You have to have the chemistry, and if the chemistry is not there, you just move down the road and find something else.
Yeah. Would you say that as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. And just like you said, you might might not win a race all year, but you get hooked up with somebody else and you just start clicking them off. So it's definitely teaming up the right two guys together, and it's still that way today. Guys will stay. If they stay 3 years together, that's
eternity.
That's about it. They're moving on to the next deal.
Yeah, and both of you had the experience of kind of banging your head against the wall with Steve Kinzer, didn't you? You both finished second to him in points and had incredible seasons. And I know, Brad, I've talked to you before. You felt kind of depressed even just after finishing second because you finished second so many times. Yeah.
Yeah, 87 was my best year. Finished second in the points, and somebody once told me I finished second to Steve 32 times, and that was, I think, heats and not just main events. But I do know that was a year. Well, now that they went back and changed preliminaries, but before that, he won 47 that year. I won 4 and finished second to him in points, and he won like 26 of the last 27 races of that season, which just incredible, And we seemed to be doing everything right. We were fast. But he was also lucky, and even Scott Gherkin, who became his crew chief later on, had worked for Carl back in the early days and stuff. He'll admit too that not only was Steve so darn good, but he was the luckiest son of a gun in the world too. I mean, he just so I've saw so many times he'd be leading a race and he'd blow a tire, and somebody'd flip at the other end of the racetrack and the red would come out. Well, those days you could put a new tire on it and go back. I saw it happen time and time again, And even the very first World of Outlaws championship at Eldora, he broke and blew in. That's when the tire came out of the air. Somebody lost a tire, and it came down and landed on the front end and knocked the front end out of his car. And all Ferkel had to do was finish, just finish. But he ended up blowing a motor, and Steve was a champion for the first year of the World of Outlaws. And when that tire, you think, what a fluke deal, took Steve out of the race, you think, well, that's just not meant to be, and Ferkel's going to win the championship. And then Ferkel ends up blowing up a few laps later, and Steve still wins it. So that's just part of that luck that he had throughout his whole career, it seems like.
Yeah. It was hard getting a feature because it was like having 3 Donnie Schatz out there. You had the 3 bit, you had Wolfgang, and you had Sammy and him. So it was definitely hard pulling your features out of them. Brad was running, you were running mostly second, thirds, and fourths, and I was running third, fourths, and fifths about every week there for that one year. And like I said, if Steve was off, Sammy was on. If Sammy was off, Wolfgang come in and blowed everybody off. One year, blowed them guys off too. So it was hard to pull your features out of them 3 guys. I can tell you that.
And those years with Eldon, you seem like you're winning just about everything, but Steve was still.
Oh yeah, I'm like Brad. I know one weekend I ran second 3 times, and I think Wolfgang, Sammy, and Steve won. I think I run second three nights in a row. So.
Is that worse than finishing 10th every night? I mean.
Oh no, I'll take seconds.
Financially, you will.
Yeah. There are good seconds and bad seconds. If you're.
But I just remember you talking about how down you got because.
Oh, you do. You feel like no matter what you do, you just can't beat them. Whether it's luck or they're just that good or whatever it is. Just
it'd be easier if your car just stunk and you knew it was your car wasn't good.
Yeah. Well, there were nights that happens.
Yeah. After your driving career and that sort of thing, I know you got into TV, but that was probably like the last thing you'd ever think of doing, once you got out of the car.
Yeah, I got lucky there, but I do remember back, I forget where Diamond P did them and where they aired, but the Hidden Heroes, they used to do a segment called Hidden Heroes, and they'd follow a team around, and they actually did that on the Coors Light Kepler car, but they had, even early on before that, had been televising some races, and Steve Evans and Brock Yates were the announcers. Brock Yates, I was just talking to somebody the other day that I think, man, forget how old I'm getting. I thought this person would have known, but Brock Yates wrote the movie Cannonball Run. He actually ran in the illegal race for years himself, and wrote the movie Cannonball Run, and was editor of Car and Driver magazine for many years, and really well known at the time. So he and Steve Evans were doing these TV shows, and I remember one time being interviewed by him, and when we were done with the interview, Brock said to me, he said, "You ought to consider TV when you get out of racing." He said, "You seem comfortable in front of the camera." Well, comfortable in front of the camera when someone's asking you questions, and you're in your fire suit and you're in your element, that's one thing. I mean, I was comfortable because you're at the racetrack, it's a 2-minute, at the most, maybe a minute interview, and you're done, and you're thinking about your race car and you go on. So I never really ever considered TV. It just kind of fell into place because after I got hurt, the Slick 50 series started out in Arizona, and the first year Jeff Swindell was the color commentator or the analyst, which is our job as a former competitor, whether it's golf, football, or whatever. The broadcast should have somebody in there that knows the sport. So Jeff did it the first year, and he got a ride for the second year, and he recommended me, actually, and so they called me up, and that was about 3 or 4 years after my accident. So I hadn't been on an airplane, I hadn't been renting a car with hand controls, I didn't know. So I said, I need some time to think about this, and I called the airlines, and I said, okay, how do I get on and off the plane? What's involved there? I called the rental companies, I said, can I get hand controls, and what do I have to do there? And called hotels to make sure that it's accessible, and so fortunately, I agreed to do it, but I'll admit the big reason was living in Ohio, cold, snowy. I got to go to
Arizona.
To go to Phoenix, Arizona, and be out there 3 to 4 days a week, every week for 10 straight weeks. So that was a bonus. And but yeah, they literally plugged me in up in the booth. Had no instruction, nothing. I mean, it was so laid back, it's unbelievable. And I remember. Before we went on the air, it was Mike Joy, who does all the NASCAR stuff on Fox now, and Dick Berggren.
Dick Berggren, yeah.
Yep. And so, I don't know, a minute to go before we're going to go live on the air across the world, I got my headset on, and these guys are standing up laughing and joking, and I'm thinking, we're going to go to live TV, and they're so laid back, and they don't even have their headset on, and pretty soon I hear the producer starting to count down in my ear, and finally they get serious and put their headset on, and we go live, and they were running the Dwarf or Legends cars, I believe, one or the other, and there was a crash, and I noticed that a radius rod had broken on one of these cars before the crash. So I brought that up, and they went back and replayed it, and sure enough, it showed this rod broken off. So we go to commercial, and they're high-fiving me and everything. That's what we want. That's what we need you here for. That's what you're good at, and that kind of thing. And that's how I got started.
That's pretty interesting. Let's talk about Sheldon a little bit. Is it fun watching Sheldon have some success?
Yeah, definitely fun. I get a little nervous watching him on TV and stuff, and I don't really get nervous racing with him when I'm side by side with him.
Now you know what everybody feels like watching you all these years.
But if I sat home watching on TV or something and he's leading, I get a little nervous. But yeah, he's running good here, and it's getting a little easier for me to watch it.
Yeah, it's probably easier if you're racing at the same time, though.
Oh yeah, definitely. If I line up beside him or racing with him, I'm fine. I don't get nervous at all. So
you don't lay back just so you can watch him, huh?
Yeah, I don't do that. But no, it's been fun. It's been watching him get better and better.
It's a different experience when it's your kids out there.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah.
Definitely is.
We'll open it up to some questions from the audience here. I'm sure we have a few. Right here.
Question for both of you. Favorite track?
Favorite track?
Oh, my favorite track would be Eldora.
Yeah, I knew.
down.
Yeah. Well, because he had such success there and made a lot of money there, but mine was Ascot because of that. That was my biggest win. Back to that '86 win, which was the final World of Outlaws race of 1986. we opened the season in 1987 right back at Ascot with a 2-day show, and I won both of those races too. So I won 3 World of Outlaws races in a row at Ascot. So, you know, it was.
Did you remember the trophy girl?
I can't remember that.
Probably a pretty good one out there.
They had some.
The
good ones.
Agajanians had it covered.
Yes, they did. that was. Yeah, Ascot. You know, we talked about the palm trees and the celebrities and how all that was a bonus, and they definitely didn't. Yeah, they made sure they had plenty of trophy girls.
There's definitely been a lot of changes to Eldora since you started.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
With the banking and just.
Yeah, they changed that. The facilities is a lot nicer and stuff. Definitely, they made a lot of improvements there.
Yep. Still like to be up by the wall, I noticed when I was there in July.
Yeah, the banking's changed a little bit, but yeah, you can't do nothing about that.
Yeah, and they still scream for you when they announce your name, so that's always good. You have some great fans out there.
Oh yeah, you know, we started racing there at a young age. Well, me and Brad and Ed back. We never even heard of Eldora when we were younger. We were Jan Opperman and Kenny Weld fans, and so they were racing over, like in Pennsylvania. They'd race over there at Williams Grove all the time, and we never heard of Eldora. Never heard of it. And we'd drive over every year and watch the 150 race, the big race at Williams Grove, and we were Opperman and Weld fans, so we'd drive over there, and then I think we went over there and raced a couple of times, and we didn't even know Eldora had all the big USAC guys over there. So a
lot of the folks might not know it was 150 laps at the National Open back then.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Opperman, were you an Opperman or a Weld fan or both?
Me and Brad were Opperman fans. I think Ed and Kenny might have been Weld fans. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I just know the Opperman.
People were usually one or the other.
Yeah, exactly. Back then, you were one or the other for sure.
If you haven't been down to the museum, we have Old Blue down there, the Weikert car that Weld drove in 72, 73. We got it down there, so won the Nationals here. Yeah.
Jack, what year was it you were in Urian's car at Eldora? I think your first time ever there, no power steering, you ran second.
I think it was 78.
And I remember,
78.
I'd won, I think that, I don't even know if I'd won a feature yet, because mine, I think it was 78 when I got my first win. But, I remember coming to Millersburg the next day, because it was like, he went to Eldora and ran second with no power steering, and nobody had ever heard of Jac Haudenschild, and that really, I think, put him on the map. I mean, people were talking, it's not like today, social media and all that, or speed sport, you had to wait, a week to find out the news, but still word of mouth traveled that, Jack ran second at Eldora. That was quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, Ferkel was, how big Ferkel was back then, and I remember standing beside him. I'm like, man, I'm racing against this big guy here. So it was pretty crazy.
He was like a god in Ohio, huh, Rick?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Right here.
About the front row challenge.
Oh, the front row challenge. Yeah, we forgot to mention that.
Yeah,
the only one to ever win from the back.
Yeah, that was definitely a good night, and everything fell my way. We had, I think, 4 or 5 restarts. We probably wouldn't have never got through there, but the restarts fell right at the right time. And I think then I ended up getting the second. Joey had it won, and hit the inside tire, spun out right in front of me, and I actually hit him. And when I hit him, it knocked my brakes off. And they had a restart, and it was going to be a green-white checkered. I'm like, I don't want to miss the bottom because I didn't have no brakes, so I ran it in there in the bottom. And I finished the green-white checkered without the brakes.
I think the next year Terry had a 15-lap feature, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was a good one.
That was a good one. Yeah.
I heard that mentioned about Eldora being 150. That was 150 laps?
No, Williams Grove National Open was 150. Yeah.
Well, whatever it was, 150 laps.
Yeah.
There ain't no sprint to 150. And that, I suppose, was back before power steering, too.
Well, it might have been, and they'd stop, I think, at 70. I think they stopped at 75 laps and refueled.
Yep.
Pretty sure.
Drivers lay down the rest.
Yeah, probably.
And they were day shows too. I remember at least a few of them. They early on when we went over, there were daytime races in that long.
Yeah.
Right here.
I'd like to stand up because I'm from New Zealand, And I just want to say from a New Zealander, we're just small guys to USA, a group of tour guys that come up every year and quite often. But I have a story.
I didn't see him sitting there.
He's probably going to shoot me for this.
Here.
I didn't see you sitting there.
No, I know you. Hiya, Chan.
Good to see
All right,
you.
buddy.
Good to see
Well,
you.
listen, him and I are pretty special friends. But I won't spend too long because everyone's got a lot of questions. But with Brad, when I raced for about 20 years in New Zealand, just us little guys going around, 15, 20 lap features, and Americans come in. They used to doing 100 races a year or 70. So, but anyway, that's not the point. The point is, when I used to come over a long time ago, my favourite was Brad, and he used to have this goatee. And the first time I met, I've got a photo of still in my little Hall of Fame down in our little man cave, But I met him a couple of years back,
Oh, wow.
But anyway, this guy here, you know how funny he is. You know how he's standing, he's always thing, but he is the man. In my opinion, he is the red hot. And when you're a faithful fan, he's the greatest. Anyway, he comes down to New Zealand to race, and I got to say to you, honestly, I wasn't going to say anything, but he was served up the worst car in the country, and. Is that the truth?
Yeah, it was.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, and I can actually say I actually beat Jac Haudenschild.
Yeah. You're
But
right.
anyway, this guy's he's a legend. So anyway, one night we were hanging out together and having fun, and him and what's your wife's first name now?
Patty.
Betty. That's right. Patty. Thanks. I apologise. I just anyway. So because 1992 this was. Correct? 1992?
Yeah.
So he's coming down, and afterwards we're just chilling out, and he comes up, he says, hey, Owen, he said, what are you doing on Saturday night? I said, well, probably racing. He said, well, Sunday night. I said, no, well, whatever day it was. And so he said, would you mind being my best man? I'm getting married to Patty. So I'm his best man. This guy, I got photos of him and I and Patty.
Yeah.
And,
I gathered up everybody that I raced with down there. So I had Jimmy Carr and him were standing side by side with me for best man, and we gathered up. Sleepy Trip was there.
Yep.
We gathered up 20.
Oh, there was a bunch.
20 people, and they were all race fans from around
New Zealand?
just racing down there. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, but the part I want to tell you now, this is the funniest thing of all. I've been saving this, and don't ever forget this. This is true. He's got a great sense of humour. We got a promoter down there at the time called Reese Fakuri, and he was like Agajanian. He pretty much the same, a double of him. So he I think he helped with putting the show on.
Yep.
He put the show on, and it was a fantastic afternoon.
Yep.
And anyway, Jack, we're all standing around after having a beer, and Jack comes to me, he says, hey, Reese, how do you talk? Reese? Is that how you speak? Say Reese?
Reese?
Yeah, Reese, he speaks like a Kiwi. Anyway, he says, say Reese, he says, do you know what dick do is? And he's like, this guy's massive. And old Reese says, no, Jack, I don't. He said, it means dick do. Your stomach sticks out further than your dick. All right, with that, I'll leave it with that, and here's my buddy.
There's always one in the crowd.
That's right.
Come on, man.
That's right. Yeah.
Other questions? Sure, we got one over here, Gary.
In Brad Doty's book, he mentioned about going to a neighboring town with Ed, and they got a ticket out of it, and maybe it was a real funny story of how he got out of the ticket.
Well, yeah, it's a long story, but Ed, the El Camino deal, when
Oh yeah, we outran the cops, and we came back town next
we
day.
didn't, Ed did. He was driving.
Ed did. I turned around and I told him to pull over, and Brad turned around and said outrun him. So
That's likely.
We outran.
Yeah.
We outran him. It was pretty. It really was pretty. It took us about 10, 15 miles, but we finally lost him, and we lost him. When we lost him through a bridge that was out, and my brother went through that bridge. It was the lights were up, and he went through the bridge sideways, and we went through there, and that's where we lost him. And basically, when we went to court, they told us we admitted we'd get out of it, and we admitted it, and they tried to get us for reckless operation, and the cop said to us, only a professional driver could get through that like that, and they said, well, the judge said, how can we get you for reckless operation if the cop's saying that it was professional driving, and they threw it out. We all
Yep.
walked out there smiling.
That's the truth.
We thought we were big stuff in.
Well, no, I was just, like I said, we did.
That was pretty much story.
It is, and how they Millersburg's a small town, so they kind of recognized it was El Camino.
How many El Caminos are in?
Right,
Yeah.
but they never could prove it, and so they basically convinced Ed that if he would just admit to it, that
They'd throw it out.
yeah, nothing would happen. They just well, they conned him into signing the papers that he had done it. Well, next thing you know, there's a court date and everything else, and that is true. And when the judge asked, if you didn't get close enough, how did you know? And he said, well, he was, he's a race car driver, and only a professional could go through the bridge like that, and that's a true story. The judge said, well, then we can't get him for reckless operation, and let him go.
Right.
Jack, you ever gonna let Dave or somebody write a book about you?
Yeah, I had a couple people mention it to me, so yeah, I told Brad if I write the book, my versions are going to be a little different than his.
Yeah, Dave says about all of us, Hewitt and all of us, he said when we're going, he's going to write the book that he couldn't write while we're still alive.
Yeah,
Not going to be the family version, is what
Yeah.
you're saying.
and that's Dave Argbright called me up when he wrote the Jack Hewitt book, and Dave called me up and he said, Jack once put something in the book here about you, and I said, oh, what? Yeah, I said, why don't you just leave that out? I said, you don't need to put that in there, and he hung up the phone, and he must have called Jack, and Dave Argbright called me back an hour later, and he said, Hewitt told me if I don't write the truth about his book, don't write it at all. And I said, put in there whatever you want.
Other questions? Yeah.
Jack, Bob Crossell told a story about going down to Australia and going into the pits and somebody stopping him and his wife and saying, well, the kid in the back can't come in. He said, well, you better let him in. He's my driver. And you won the race.
Yeah, that's true.
Got some stories like that?
Oh, yeah, that's true. I went over there with Bob Trossel, and one of the funnest times I ever had over there was going over with him. He took, I think he took me and Jack Hewitt, and maybe Mike Sweeney over. I forget who the team was that year, but yeah, that was my first race, and we pulled in there, and I was in the back seat, and they said he can't get in there, and Bob just laughed and said he's my driver. He's got to come in. So yeah, we won that night. So Bob was great over there. I had more fun over there with him. I loved hanging around with that guy.
I think Bob might have done more for spreading sprint car racing to Australia than anybody with his trips in those days that went over there.
Just the Kiwi, the New Zealander here, and the Australian fans that come over, and a lot of them come to my race that I promote, and then come on, Eldora out here. Any of you Americans that haven't been or get a chance, if you get a chance to go to Australia or New Zealand, by all means, do whatever you have to do to get there, because the countries are beautiful. I've never been to New Zealand. I've seen a lot of pictures, and Lord of the Rings, my kids all watched it. That was all filmed there to give you an idea of how beautiful it is. But just the people are so friendly. Even Wade Onger, who's here, and anybody that's heard him on the mic, he's a little off. And his words, I don't know how many kids, but I said something to him about all Australians seem to be nice. He said, there's so few of us we don't dare piss each other off because everybody would be mad at everybody. But it's just the country geographic, or the size is the same as the United States, but it's 10% of the population that we have here. But just everybody's so nice, and if you get a chance, you need to go down there. They're sprint car fanatics, man. They love their sprint cars and their drivers.
And the promotions, too. The way they promoted the races was a lot different. Americans versus the Australians.
Yeah, it's always good. I've had more fun down there than ever.
Yeah.
Was there ever any aspirations from either of you to try to move on to Indy or NASCAR or any other type of race car?
I always wanted to get in Indy cars. That was kind of a goal of mine later on. I always liked that kind of racing, and I thought it fit me good. And I got lucky enough to test a Pennzoil Indy car one time at Texas Motor Speedway, and I got up to speed pretty quick. I felt pretty comfortable in it, but didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, with me, I didn't really look that far ahead. I felt like, I hadn't accomplished or figured out the sprint car yet, to move on to something else. But, I felt like the year I got hurt, I was just really starting to get it figured out in a sprint car and stuff. But, my goal, and it's funny because Kyle Larson, I got to know his mom and dad, and I tell people this story too. My claim to fame, there's a video his mom put out. Kyle was like 2 years old, and he's playing with his little die-cast cars, and she asks, "Who's that?" And he says, "That's Bad Doty. That's Bad Doty." And here's Kyle Larson at 2 years old. But his goal and his family's goal were to get him to the World of Outlaws level. I mean, that's what they wanted to do, was run the World of Outlaws. And he's so good, he jumped right past that. And Christopher Bell, basically did the same thing. But when I was young, and we were growing up talking about the Opperman and Weld fans, I mean, sprint cars were everything to me. And yeah, I mean, NASCAR wasn't that big then, but Indy cars were. But to me, that was way above a little guy from Apple Creek, Ohio, was ever going to get into an Indy car. But if I could make a living driving a sprint car, just paying the rent is all I wanted to do, and I would have been happy. And so fortunately, the sprint car thing was pretty good for a lot of years. Okay, we bored them to death now.
Well, me and Brad, we knew Tim Richmond pretty good, and he'd come down to my place every once in a while, and
Wow.
Tim wanted to get into sprint cars, so he was from Sandusky. He didn't live very far from us, so
Actually, Ashland.
Ashland.
Yeah,
So he came down to me and my brother said, "Well, come on down here and we'll show you. This guy's got a sprint car down here." And so he come pulling in our drive, and I got 3 sisters, and he come pulling in our drive with in his Harley with the black leathers on, and they don't forget Tim Richmond for sure. But so I got to be friends with him, man, and he tried that sprint car deal a little bit, made a couple laps at Lakeville, and he didn't. I think he run a sprint car more than that, but he ended up just staying in, the Indy cars for a while, and then what happened there? His parents, his mom wanted to get him out of the Indy cars. She didn't want him in Indy cars no more, so she pretty much put her foot down and said, you got to get NASCAR. So we definitely it was kind of cool knowing him because he was big.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a few pictures of him in sprint cars around here, and he didn't race them much, but once in a while, yeah. So you were responsible for getting him introduced to them.
We went to Ohio Speed Week in the 90s, and the biggest thing for me was I got to see where Brad Doty lived.
Are you a stalker, or are you?
She is actually. Do you guys? I'm going to tell the story.
All right.
Do you remember back the live TV days? We were live here at Knoxville, and the first year or two, the fans seemed upset because they thought the TV was holding up the show too much, and there were some things that were happening, but the TV got blamed for a lot of things that weren't really their fault. But producers finally realized, let's get the crowd more involved. Let's get cameras in the crowd, and let's scan the crowd with the cameras, and just have them feel more a part of it. If we're in commercial or there's downtime, let's get them involved. And some crazy lady held up this sign, "Brad Doty's a hottie," and TNN, her speed, whatever it was, zoomed in on that live on the air. Well, it was her. So, yep, she's the one that my claim to fame, I guess.
I was working on a car that time that made the A main that night, and we wheeled all the cars out. We started 13th, I think, so they pushed our car out on the backstretch, introduced everybody. I turn around and go back to the pits, and I look up on the big screen. My wife.
Say, yep, that's my wife.
And the guy that did it, we parked at his house like for years, and he would drink and he'd get all.
Wait a minute, you're telling me a guy made this sign?
Hey, can you do me the sign? Brad Doty, I love when you write is Brad Doty is a hottie. So he did it, and so my daughter looked at it. Well, she didn't think you could see it good enough because the letters weren't colored in, so she colored it all in. And all the way over, I just kept going like this. And anybody I saw, I was going, at the time, before that, when they would interview people, they'd say, oh, this driver's a hottie, this driver's a hottie. Yeah, the announcer, right? What was her name? Anyway, she was. Anyway, so I just kept showing him, so I sat down over here, and I don't know, so for some reason I went like this, and so there was this wall in action, and people were going, show him the sign, show him the sign. I'm going, what? Show him the sign. I'm like, oh, yeah. And down, and I stood in the front, and there it was. I had to stalk him to get him to sign it several years later. But.
We got time for one or two more questions, and we'll get going here.
You guys talk about some of your Nationals experience, good, bad?
Brad, you made an alphabet trip one year that people don't remember.
Yeah, Wolf.
Because Wolfie got to 5th and you only got to 6th.
Well, Wolfie, when he did it, it was TV too, so a lot more people remember that. But and it gets me a little frustrated. But he did come out of the deal as well. But anyway, I started I won the Friday night non-qualifier. It was 1985 in Ron Pack's car, and it wasn't. I mean, it was good equipment, but it wasn't the best. I mean, steel block and stuff. But anyway, we won the non-qualifiers on Friday night, and that put us in the center, middle of the C, and we won that. And went to the back of the B. And I remember, Steve Wolf from Lincoln, Nebraska. Anybody? But he's been around racing forever. And
seats. Was he involved in seats?
He knew he knew the guy. Well, Lincoln's a small town, kind of a small racing town, but he knew the guy that built some of the first aluminum seats back then. Hung out at his shop and stuff. So, but Steve was telling me, and we had some really young guys working on the car. Tony Wilson was the general manager of the team for Ron Pack. I did pretty much my own setup and everything on the car. And another young kid, Bubba Harrell, working on it. So anyway, they're getting caught up in watching me come through the field, and Steve tells the story. He said, "Hey, you guys, you better get some tires ready and go get some fuel. He's going to be in the next race." And he had to remind them, and they were like, "Oh yeah," and they're thrashing in the pits to get tires ready and get fuel cans filled up. And so we started back the B and won it. Started back of the A and ran 6th. And like I said, Wolfgang did it a couple years later, but he did finish 5th in the A.
Yeah.
How about you at the Nationals?
Nationals, I think I ran 2nd one year. I don't know. I don't know if Danny won it or what. I think I won all 3 Outlaw races that year, and then got 2nd in the Nationals. So that was, I didn't win the right one, but I came close.
But 2nd paid more than any of those Outlaw shows you won.
Oh yeah, definitely 2nd was good.
I think it was 99.
Yeah, might have been. Yeah, I think we won 3 Outlaw races. Yeah. I don't remember dates very good, but that sounds about right.
Yeah.
You had to run through the alphabet also with the Pennzoil car. I think you got up into the top 10.
Yeah, Knoxville. Yeah, I think I did one time, but the only time I remember getting through the alphabet was Chico. I got all the way through them all to the A one year, but I don't know if I was. I don't know if I made it all the way through here. I can't remember that.
He mentioned Chico. I got one quick one. and you asked earlier about driving for Gary Stanton. The first time I drove for him in '84, at Chico, was advertised to be a 40-lap feature, and at the drivers' meeting they announced it was going to be 50-lap, and everybody, all of us were like, why? You know, when you said 40, why is it going to be 50? And everybody was mad. And I was leading in Gary Stanton's car. I had such a lead. Steve and Sammy were running second and third, and I could see them in front of me. And Gary was out on the racetrack giving me, signals like slow, and I felt like I was slow. Chico was usually really rough and heavy and choppy, and there was a groove around the bottom, pretty smooth and actually kind of black. And I was just rolling the bottom, felt like I was just pity-patting around the bottom, taking it so easy. And the 48th lap, I broke aluminum torque tube and coasted into the infield, and through the checkered, and Steve stopped back, before the start-finish line. He thought he finished second, and so he didn't even know that we had broke, And so that was my chance to win the Gold Cup. I mean, I was so close to winning the Gold Cup. And, well, let me back up. In '82, one of the wins I should have had, too, was at Baylands. I started 18th, and it was rough, choppy. They flipped like 30-some cars in 3 nights of racing. I don't know if you remember that, Baylands, how bad. And we were leading it through 4 or 5 red flags and had tore the Jacobs ladder off, and the rear end finally the torque tube pulled out of the studs, and I lost that one on the last lap. So the Gold Cup, that really hurt. It was the Gold Cup. So one year in Jack in the Pennzoil car, that's back when they could run radios, and I was on the radio with Jack while he was leading the Gold Cup, just talking to him, trying to time to stay calm. He had such a big lead, and one thing about Jack, and like I said about Woodruff, I don't care if Jack's sitting right here, if there's no wall around the racetrack, it's not if he's going to go off the end, it's when. And so I just kept reminding him, you got a huge lead, calm down, don't jump the cushion. And I felt when he won that race, as corny as this sounds, it almost felt like I finally won the Gold Cup too, because I was on the radio with him, felt like I was kind of riding along and had something to do with it, just trying to keep him out of trouble. And
You're my spotter.
Yeah, there you go. Spotter first sprint car spotter.
Yeah, that worked out good. That was big.
And you like Chico. You won that Gold Cup a few times, didn't you? Yeah, 3 times. All right. Let's give these guys a round of applause.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.